Hi, I'm Diet Cokehead, and man, this is kind of a hard video. Okay, I found out shit about Lou Reed that I don't like. Isn't that the worst? Isn't that just the worst? You have like, and I understand why people were upset about the Richie Edwards video. I understand why people get upset whenever you have these people that inspire you to be an artist, but then you find out that they suck. Their stories suck. Andy Warhol fucking sucked. And if you really want to understand Andy Warhol, I think you have to look at the time that allowed him to be. The 60s were through his heyday, like the 60s and 70s, whenever he first started, it was basically the climate for trans and gays was changing a lot. If you look specifically in the 60s and 70s, you'll see a lot of pop culture like John Waters, who, by the way, did the exact same fucking thing that Andy Warhol tried to do, and he did it without hurting a single person, and he remains like a perfect gay glittery angel. Well, Warhol just fucking sucks. He's a monster. But in the 70s, there was enough discussion about it had in the 60s, and you could even see the traces of this go all the way back to the 50s with Ed Wood doing Glen or Glinda or whatever. Um, bands like the New York Dolls and even AC/DC and stuff were kind of like playing a lot with gender bending and making it very taboo and exciting. It's trans stuff has always been a thing, and but there are people that were it's never been safe to be like let's everybody has always got like people have been beating them up since fucking beating up people was fucking invented. So there's always been like a lot of a glamorous side and an animosity side, but then there's also like the taboo and like the like if you know how 90% of trans or whatever, they're kicked out of their houses or whatever, they're trafficked into like doing porn on the internet or just being a prostitute. That has always been a fucking thing, and it's not just from like, oh, they're all sick little perverts. It's not like that. It's that they're thrown out of their homes whenever they're very young, so they're exploited by predators, and that's what Andy Warhol was and did. There was a big shift in the art world in the 60s too. Mass prints were becoming very popular, and like they could be sold to every house in America. So Andy's like immortalized pop art. So hang on, what's it? Roy Lichtenstein. He did the comic book thing with the big blown up comic books and all the dots in their faces and stuff, which he was basically stealing comic book art and blowing it up, and then the art world loved it, and like that lowbrow pop art thing became extremely popular. So did like Keen paintings and stuff like that. All of that shit was blowing up in the 60s. So this motherfucker Andy Warhol, he was making thousands. Like his prints were going for 10 to like $50,000 a canvas. It was insane. He made an insane amount of money. But whenever he started the factory, it was basically funded by like Edie Sedgwick's trust fund. They fueled all the drugs and all the like all of his subjects. He filmed them obsessively. His films were fucking stupid. They were really long. They were really, really boring. They were really I think that they were stupid on fucking purpose. I think a big part of Andy's brand was going like, oh, these assholes will think that that's brilliant. I legitimately cannot tell how much is Warhol like actually going. I think this is the most brilliant, like, oh, this paper bag blowing in the wind is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. I don't know how much is actually that, like being an artist or whatever, and how much of it is like 100% him being an asshole and like these people are gonna fucking spend thousands of dollars on a soup can painting. Like I don't know. Like he did justify it. Like he did make a thing like, oh, the everyday stuff that I see around America is whatever, or I mean, like he did come up with some brilliant conclusions, like that's what I love about this country, like a Coke is a Coke in a homeless person's hand or the president's hand. He did say the 15 minutes of fame thing, which was correct, and he was correct about, he was smart, he was a brilliant person. Like, to him, fame was the art piece. Being a socialite was the art piece. But he became very interested in films and stuff, and he was, like, he made The Factory, and The Factory was, it was an influencer house before influencer houses. Basically, he patrolled drag clubs or whatever for like runaways and people addicted to heroin, bonus points if they were gay or trans or like something that was taboo or whatever. And then he would be like, they were given no money. It all came out to like, oh, I'll film you and I'll make you a star. And he was very prolific at the time. And the only promise he made anybody was exposure, which they did receive, but they didn't receive any money or payments or anything from this dude again, who made fucking millions. I had to write down what happened to all of the Factory people because it's grim. And we all know Edie Sedgwick, right? His it girl. She had like a huge inheritance, more problems than anyone that he's ever met. He was very obsessed with death, and he said on one occasion that whenever Edie Sedgwick kills herself, he hopes they let him film it. Candy Darling was a trans icon. She starred in several of Warhol's films. Inspired a lot of I think all of these people were in Walk on the Wild Side, but she died of lymphoma at 29 in poverty and still. Yeah. Holly Woodlawn was another trans Warhol star, also in Walk on the Wild Side. Spent much of her life struggling with homelessness, addiction, odd jobs, and she died in 2015. Jackie Curtis was a trans playwright and performer, hugely influential in the drag and punk crossover scene, and died of a heroin overdose at 38. Janet Susan Hoffman was an actress in many of his films, sued him for unpaid work, later became a writer, survived but broke for years. Nico, that was Warhol's basically Sedgwick replacement. German singer that he just kind of plopped onto the Velvet Underground, and she left the scene and developed a heroin addiction, which not necessarily his fault. Heroin seems, from what I've read, was fucking everywhere, all over the place in New York around this time. But he saw it and capitalized on it, you know? Jared Malinga, Warhol's assistant and collaborator, survived, became a poet and photographer, but long resented not being credited. And Robert Olivo, performer known as the Pope of the Factory, died of a liver disease at 42. Almost all of them died young, broke, and addicted. Valerie Solanas was a radical feminist and author of the Scum Manifesto, and she briefly circled the Factory. The Factory kind of had an open door policy, and it let in all kinds of freaks. One of those dudes, Robert, what's his fuck? Olivo, beat somebody almost to death there. Like, it was like every corner somebody was like breaking down or having a drug overdose. It was just a trap house. It was just a fancy New York trap house for socialites. But yeah, Valerie Solanas was a radical feminist and author of the Scum Manifesto, and she she walked into the Factory and she shot Warhol 3 times in the chest. He was dead for a minute, but he survived. You know, assholes kind of live forever. So, Bob Dylan famously referred to him as a vampire. Apparently, one time whenever he visited the Factory, he was offered one of Warhol's paintings that sold for millions, but he rejected it. Lou Reed had a very complicated relationship with Warhol, and whenever I was doing this, I was really surprised at how big of an asshole Lou Reed was. Of course, like back then, like I said, being bisexual was just starting to be like cool or popular or like taboo, and like it was the freakiest thing ever. You know, you see it a lot with Bowie and the New York Dolls, and of course Lou Reed and the Velvet Underground, and it was all very, it was marketed on, and we were making a decent amount of progress with it until AIDS happened, basically. Reed was very complicated and brutal in his own ways. There's like every partner he's had has said that he was like viciously abusive. Um, he had a very complicated relationship with Warhol, and he seemed to admire him quite a bit. Um, but Lou kind of distanced himself, especially after the shooting, and he basically said that Andy's scene was a big fucking problem. Warhol basically invented the Velvet Underground. Like without Andy Warhol, there would be no Velvet Underground, and that's kind of a hard pill to swallow because I fucking love them. Like they're a big part of why, like Lou Reed and everything. That's a big part of why I started writing, and so I totally understand why it fucking sucks whenever you find out that your favorites had an ugly fucking history, and the factory's pretty nasty. Warhol said he loves it whenever people talk about nothing but their problems because he regards it as high art. And I mean, like, what are we doing today? Like, he was right. The way he went about it was fucking monstrous and inexcusable. And I really think that John Waters is kind of evidence of that himself. I mean, look at, like, yeah, Divine's life had its own tragedy and whatever, but John Waters never did anything to hurt her or rip off his subjects, and frequently hired the same actors. And once money did start coming, he made sure everybody got their fair share. And he didn't see a fraction of the amount that fucking Andy Warhol made, you know? I mean, Andy Warhol's estate alone was millions. He never funded anything that went on in the factory. Nobody in the factory, none of the superstars, none of the people that he exploited ever got any money. He was basically, he was a worse version of the soft white underbelly. But he's kind of that gross level of sociopathy where he kind of like exploits and bleeds people, but he like looks fine on paper, you know what I mean? So like he never does anything like that's you could just outright go and sue him or whatever for, but like you fucking should be able to. It's kind of that thing. He's that kind of a monster. So yeah, Andy Warhol was not a genius because he painted soup cans. He was a genius because he realized that you could take the most vulnerable people in the world, chew them up on camera, and people would clap and call it culture. He invented influencer exploitation before ring lights were invented, and he made suffering fashionable and in vogue. His superstars usually died broke, addicted, and dead before 40. Some of them just disappeared, and Warhol cashed checks, bought a townhouse, and gave his money all away to modern. His estate is like a philanthropy, going to like rich college fund, trust fund babies, doing modern art stuff. I don't fucking know what we learned here today. Anyway, that's Andy Warhol's The Factory.